Hey guys, welcome to Mr. Smith's Kitchen. I'm Brian, Mr. Smith Kitchen. Today we're going to make a cheesecake. We're going to make a cinnamon toast crunch cheesecake. So, if you're new to my channel, thanks for stopping by to say hi. Hope you stick around for shenanigans and check out maybe some of my old videos. If you're returning to my channel, thank you. Means you're getting something out of this. If you are new, we spend a lot. We do some baking, cooking, woodworking, canning. We're basically documenting my life, my family's life a little bit, as much as they'll let me. And so that way people get to know me even after I'm gone. But that being said, like I said, today we're doing cheesecakes. We eat cheesecake, a cinnamon toast crunch cheesecake, and not really request, but a friend of mine, Kevin, found this cheesecake, saw it online on some social media, and was like, look at this, Brian, this looks amazing. So I had him send me the picture of it so that way I could remember what it was he found interesting that we wanted to try. And found a recipe for it, and we're going to run with it and see how it works. Now, cheesecakes, they seem very intimidating at first. And they're not horrible. Not to say that you can't screw this up. This does have a fair amount of moving parts, does take a little bit of practice and patience and understanding and, paying attention, but it's not anything we can't accomplish. Now, we've made a couple other cheesecakes on this channel before, and we've had great success with them. So I think we can have success with this one too. We are going to make a graham cracker crust. We're going to do a graham cracker and cinnamon toast crunch crust with a really nice New York style cheesecake topped with some dollops of whipped cream and more cinnamon toast crunch with a little bit of cinnamon toast crunch in between. So I'm going to get the camera moved and so we can see what we got going on here. We'll go over some things we will need to make this with, some tools and whatnot. And then we'll start making the crust and then we'll take it from there. All right, so let me get this camera moved and we will start our adventure. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do, we're going to preheat our oven, 350 degrees, because we're going to have to bake this crust before we make the cheesecake. So like I said, it's a graham cracker and cinnamon toast crunch cheesecake. I got the recipe for it written down right here in the handy dandy notebook. If you're new to my channel, I write every recipe down in my notebook. I have one for baking and one for dinners and side dishes. If we like it, we leave it alone, keep it in the notebook. If we don't like it, we'll just tear it out and throw it away. So that being said, the crust is really easy, but let's talk about some things you're going to need. I am using a food processor. You don't have to use a food processor for this, because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our graham crackers, which we've got 150 grams of graham crackers, which is about 16 graham crackers, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm sorry, 13 graham crackers, but it's 150 grams. Okay, so we're going to take those, and we're going to we have to smash those in the cinnamon toast crunch up. Some other things that you're going to need for this. You're going to need a bowl or two. You are going to need a scale. A scale is relatively important because cheesecakes, they don't have a whole lot of wiggle room. But you can make this without a scale. I would just recommend getting one. The next thing you're going to need is a 9-inch springform pan. Now, a springform pan, I don't know if you can see it in there or not, but see the break in it right there? That's because there's a latch right there that allows that to pop out from around it. And you'll see it. I'll point it out again when we get the aluminum foil off. I've got this one lined with wrapped with aluminum foil because we're going to use a water bath. All right, when we actually bake the cheesecake. If your pan is non-stick, like this one is not non-stick, spray it with something. All right, you don't have to, but it will make your life a little easier when you're trying to get this all apart. And I mean, you'll see as the process goes on. This is kind of a long process. This might be, I hope not, but it might be a fairly long video. So I've got my 9-inch springform pan, and since mine isn't non-stick, I got a little spray in there. I got my aluminum foil wrapped around. You want to make sure there's no creases on the bottom. Okay, see how there's no lines, no creases, as far as like two different pieces of foil. Because if you have a crease there, water will inevitably seep into this, and it could potentially seep into this and ruin your cheesecake. We don't want that. All right, so we've got our 9-inch pan together. We've got it sprayed if you need it sprayed. If you don't need it sprayed, fantastic. We've got our foil wrapped around it. So the next thing we're going to need, like I said, is we're going to need a way to crush up these graham crackers and some Cinnamon Toast Crunch. So we've got 150 grams of graham crackers. We've got a half a cup of... Let me bring my ingredients list back here. We've got a half a cup of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, which is about 40 grams. And you can adjust that either way. And if you don't have a food processor, you could just as easily stick this in a freezer bag or a bag of some sort and use a hammer, a rolling pin, a mallet, whatever you like to use to whack things with, and crush these up. All right, I'm using a food processor, so I'm going to go ahead and get my 40 grams of Cinnamon Toast Crunch in there, and I'm going to go ahead and put my graham crackers in here. And this food processor I have here is a cordless one. We just got it, and I'm still learning on it. If you watched my tasty fail video, the banana cream pie video that I put out last week, which... I hope you do, because then the video that I put out this past Tuesday gives you some tips and tricks I learned to not have that fail. And we also talk about failing and how it's okay. So, but anyhow, this one's kind of new. It's cordless, and it's taken me some getting used to. But when I remade that cream pie, by golly, I think I've got this thing under control. So we're going to we don't want to turn this into like a fine powder, but we want it to be some nice granules. And we'll get that turned on, get the speed all the way up to high, and we're just going to pulverize this. Maybe. If I can get it to work. All right. Doesn't take long at all. Oh, Mr. Graham Cracker. Right, I think we are good. Now, like I said, we don't want to turn it into powder, but at the same time, you don't want well, you may want giant chunks in it, but I look for, well here, I'll show you real quick. Here's what I look for. I do a little bit of, there's some chunks in there. It's not a fine powder by any means. But that just makes a fine graham cracker crust. That way it sticks together, it holds better. You get better coverage with the butter, I think. So we got our graham cracker crust, or our graham crackers, and we've got our Cinnamon Toast Crunch in there. We are going to now put this into a bowl. That way we can add our butter to it. You could, if you have a regular food processor, you could probably leave it in the processor and process it up, but I never have, and I don't think I'm going to start today. Chris just told me I could. But, like I said, I never have, so I don't want to screw this up. So, I have a half a cup of, a quarter cup of melted butter, which would be right around 26 grams. Okay, a stick of butter is 115 grams, and that is a half a cup. So right around 63 grams. We're just going to put that in there. Get that. So you'll notice when you melt real butter, it's got like a whiteness. It usually sits at the bottom of it. That's actually the fat from the milk, and you want that in here. It'll help hold it together. And we're just going to mix this together. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think I did at the beginning, or as soon as we came down here to the counter. We want to have our oven preheating at 350 degrees. All right, so we got it all nice and coated. Now you don't want it super moist, but graham crackers, like any other cracker or cookie, can vary on how well they hold together. But you want this to see how it sticks together. That's kind of what you're looking for, but you don't want it to be super moist. You don't want it to be wet. You just want it. So if you need to add a little more butter to it, do it a teaspoon at a time. As we found out with the vanilla wafer crust that we did with the banana cream pie. So now we're going to take our pan. We'll get the scale out of the way here. And we're going to pour this in the pan. All right, now we're not going up the sides or anything. I mean, you could, but this particular cheesecake recipe did not call for it, so we're not going to. Get that all in there. Don't want to waste any of that delicious crust. And we're just going to press this firmly in to the bottom. Just like such. You can use your hand to get it down in there. You can use a measuring cup. I mean, there's a million and one tools you can use to do this with. I'm just going to use my hand. You want to make sure it's even, so that way it bakes evenly. Like I said, we're going to bake this in the oven first, so we can get it set. All right, and this is also adds like a little extra layer of protection against that water bath. All right, so we got that in there, looking good, nice and even, maybe. Yep, I think we are in good shape right there. Wipe off my hands. So, what do we do next? All right, we got our crust in there. So the next thing we're going to do is not drop the camera, but we're going to put this in the oven for 10 minutes. All right, that will set this crust bottom, the bottom crust, and then we're going to let this cool. And while it's cooling, we can make our cheesecake. So when I come back, we'll get this out of the oven and we'll start making the actual cheesecake filling. All right, see you. All right, so it's been 10 minutes. I just pulled our crust out of the oven, and right there we are. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but things to look for to know that your crust is ready is you're looking for let me go set this down real quick. It's rather warm. All right, for those of you who are new to my channel, this is my entire kitchen. It's not very big at all, but we are working on trying to get a new one down in the basement. So I have to take things to cool out into the dining room, set them on the table on a rack. So you want to place that on a cooling rack. Don't turn your oven off. Leave it at the 350 it's at, because we're going to need it. But we're going to let that cool. So to tell that it's about where it needs to be, or where it needs to be, pay attention to the graham crackers, because your graham crackers are going to go from the brown look they have, that tannish brown look they have, to a darker brown. All right, and that way you know that they're in good shape. All right, so things we're going to have to do ahead of time before we actually start making the filling. I've already done this, but you'll want to do some of this first thing in the morning. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need, if I can not get it all over the oven, is 4 8-ounce blocks of cream cheese. Okay, and so you're looking at 32 ounces of cream cheese. It's just 4 packs of cream cheese. That's the very first one we're going to need. And first thing in the morning, get it out of the fridge, let it sit on a plate, and get to room temperature. The more room temperature it is, the better life will be. What cream cheese is by nature very hard to get smooth when you're whipping it together or when we're mixing it, because we're going to take this and we're going to mix it for about 5 minutes. That's the very first step on this. Another thing you will need to do, you will need to get 4 eggs out. Okay, 4 eggs right here, whole eggs. You'll want large eggs. All right, so we're going to do, and that's about 200 grams. All right, and then you're going to want to get about a half hour before you start the process. Get out your heavy cream, all right, and let it start warming up. But I don't know if you can see it in there or not, but I've got some Cinnamon Toast Crunch just floating in there. All right, so you know how when you have a bowl of cereal, morning, noon, or night, I mean, depending on who you are, I eat cereal any time of day. You get that milk that's left at the bottom that's got all that cereal flavor in it. That's what we're doing right there, okay? And that's 2/3 of a cup of heavy whipping cream, all right? And we've got our Cinnamon Toast Crunch floating in it. We did that about, well, I pulled the heavy whipping cream out, I don't know, about an hour ago, but I put the Cinnamon Toast Crunch in there about 30 minutes ago. So that way, and we'll remove the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. We don't need it in there. You will need a few more ingredients. You will need 2.5 cups or 500 grams of sugar, just regular old granulated sugar. You will need 3 teaspoons or 12.6, 13 grams of vanilla extract, and use a good vanilla extract, a pure one. Don't get a baking extract. Don't get the imitation stuff. It's just not as good. And then you will need 1 teaspoon or about 2 grams of cinnamon. All right, and that's all we're going to really need for our cheesecake. I did, and this is optional. Out of the videos I watched, I saw some people do this. I saw some people didn't, but I crushed up some Cinnamon Toast Crunch and about a 1/4 cup, and I'm going to put half of that in this mix as we mix it, and then I'll sprinkle the other half on top of it before we bake it. All right? That way we ensure we got that flavor in there. It's not a lot, but it's enough. That way we don't overpower it. Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal is not the healthiest thing for you by any means. But I don't really cook or bake healthy. Sometimes I cook healthy, but very rarely do I bake anything healthy. All right, so let me get down here so we can start the process. Because the first thing we're going to need to do is whip this cream cheese into a frenzy. So I'm using a stand mixer with a wire whisk attachment. If you don't have a stand mixer, that's okay. But that means you're going to stand there and beat your cream cheese for about 5 minutes, because I have to run this for about 5 minutes or until it's smooth. We don't want lumps, which is why you room temperature your cream cheese. If you don't get it to room temperature, it's harder to get. I mean, they're small, but you'll have small clumps of cream cheese. So let me go ahead and mix this on medium, and about every minute or so, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna scrape it and I'm gonna like pull the cream cheese out of there. But I'm going to run this for 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so I'll let that go for about 4 minutes. You're just looking to get it smooth, okay, is what we're trying to do here. Let me pause my movie. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our sugar, our 500 grams of sugar, 2.5 cups. It's a lot of sugar. We're going to take our teaspoon of cinnamon. I'm just going to put it in there. And then I'm going to take a fork, and I'm going to mix that together a little bit. Because if you don't, the cinnamon could fly out. Yeah, so this kind of helps get it a little mixed up there. All right, so we got our 2.5 cups of sugar and our cinnamon. Now I'm going to turn this back on. Actually, before I do that, let's practice what we preach. And we're going to scrape our sides down. But see how it's nice and smooth now? It's no longer a block. I don't have any clumps in there that I can see. You know. And that's the important part. I mean, you could have like little micro balls of cream cheese. That's okay because we're not done mixing yet. So, and that'll, because what we're going to do now is we're going to add that cinnamon and sugar to it gradually while it's running. All right, this is what we're wanting to do. That way we can get it good and mixed up. But it's important that you scrape your sides down. That way, especially in between putting stuff in, or if you have to, mix for any length of time, that way you ensure you get everything mixed well. Because as cool as these mixers are, they do have dead spots, usually right in the middle of the bowl where that point hits. Usually likes to, not always get mixed up. So we'll go ahead and get that started back up. And we're just going to pour our sugar in a little bit at a time. Along with our cinnamon. Just like such. And then we're just going to pick up the pace a little bit and get it good and incorporated. All right, we are good and incorporated thus far. So we'll go ahead and get our spatula. Now, let's say you do, you mix it, you get to the step where you're about to put the eggs in it, and you find that you've got some big lumps of cream cheese left. It's okay. Just simply put it back down and keep mixing. But you don't want to mix it on like a super high speed. Medium high for most of this. We're not looking to incorporate a ton of air into this like you would a cake. Like a standard cake with flour and sugar and, oil or milk or butter or whatever. But, we want to make sure we get it together good and get a little bit of air in it. So we'll get a good mix there. Make sure we don't have anything in the bottom that's, going to give us fits. I think we're in good shape there. So now it's time to incorporate our eggs, our vanilla, and some of that cinnamon toast crunch that I crushed up, that other quarter cup. And like I said, that's an option. I saw people who would not crush up any of it and put it in their cheesecake, but they would when they would put it in the pan, they would pour half the batter in there, and then they would put a layer of cinnamon toast crunch, and then they would pour the rest of the batter on top of that. So, I mean, it's really up to you. Now, with your eggs, we're just going to put them in one at a time. All right, so we'll dump one egg in there. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact, but we're going to run it until I can't see any more of the yellow. All right, I can't see any more of the yellow. Next egg, we'll get the broken one in there. And what this does, by putting them in one at a time, it ensures we're not over whipping the cheesecake. By putting them in one at a time, it gives it a chance to break it up, that one up, instead of sitting there mixing forever to put all four of them in at the same time. And once again, eggs at room temperature. Dairy should always be at room temperature, unless it's otherwise noted in the recipe. Okay, got that done. Take our spatula here. Make sure we got everything mixed good. I do so like cheesecakes. And I've had some failures. Cheesecakes, the hardest part of a cheesecake in reality is, excuse me, is when you bake it. You want to bake it low and slow And you want to bake it in a water bath. That way it gets its even heat so it doesn't crack. I mean, if it does crack, it's kind of whatever. Like, you know, like I've said dozens of times before, we're not doing this for, you know, like a contest or anything like that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we're going to put our vanilla in there, our 3 teaspoons of vanilla, just like such. And then I need to get my Cinnamon Toast Crunch out of my heavy cream real quick. There we go. Good shape there. All right. And we're going to add our heavy cream in there. It's got that Cinnamon Toast Crunch flavor in it. It'll be awesome. Now, if you don't get all your Cinnamon Toast Crunch out of your heavy cream, it's okay. It's okay. Because all it's going to do is mix it up in there. You may run into like a soggy, soft piece of Cinnamon Toast Crunch. But it's okay. So we'll get that cream whipped in there. And while that's whipping in there, I'm going to take about half of my mushed up Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And I'm just going to sprinkle it in there with it. You know, like I said, this is an option. You don't have to, but I thought it looked cool and fun, and it would give it just that little extra bit of flavor. Get it till it's just combined there, and we're just combined there. Get that up. And that's it. I mean, that's how you make the batter for your cheesecake. It's not, like I said, cheesecake isn't hard. You just kind of have to pay attention to, you know, the parts. I mean, there are a few moving parts compared to like the yellow cake we made last week. You know, some cakes are a little complex, require a little attention. Some are not. But I'm telling you, if you can get cheesecake down, you can make just about anything. And that's the honest God's truth. You know, and like I said, they're not hard. You follow the instructions, you know, and like right now, let's say we didn't want to make this a Cinnamon Toast Crunch cheesecake. We just don't put the Cinnamon Toast Crunch in it. You know, we don't put the cinnamon in it. Then you just got a basic cheesecake. I do see some really small clumps of cheesecake, or of cream cheese. But that's okay. Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Let's say you do see, I mean, like some pin needle size pieces of cheesecake, of cream cheese. All right, it's not the end of the world. When they get that small, you know, the reason why we're blending in for long periods with the cream cheese is so we don't have any clumps, you know, big pieces. Where the itty bitty little pieces, they will easily disappear when you heat it up in the oven in the water bath, and just become part of the cheesecake. All right, let me get this straightened up real quick, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so got everything at least moved out of the way. I'll do up dishes as soon as we're done. So the last couple steps before baking. We're going to take our mix here, pour it in the bowl, or pour it in our springform pan on top of our crust. And our crust is room temperature. It takes no time at all for it to get down to temp. You should be able to handle the pot. That's the key to it right there. All in there like such. Good. That, and then we'll spread this out. But this recipe really takes it all the way to the edge. That's kind of cool. So this springform pan is about 3 inches deep. And that is taking it right up to the 3 inches, which is awesome. All right, so like I said before, the key to making a cheesecake, I'm going to go ahead and take this and I'm going to pound it on the table real quick. on the counter. What we're doing is we're getting any air bubbles that might be in there out. All right, because we don't want air bubbles. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a casserole dish. This one is, if I had to guess, 10 by 20. And I'm going to take my cheesecake and I'm going to set it down inside of it. Now, I could put the water in it right like this because I'm going to water bath it and I'm going to take it up probably about the halfway point on this pan. And what that does is it makes it so it'll evenly bake, all right, because we're baking it slow and the water will help slow down the baking process. So I'm going to take it up as high as I can, halfway to 2/3, and we're going to bake this in the oven. Now we're going to bake this in the oven at 350 degrees. That's why I told you not to turn off your oven. So I hope you did. If you did, reheat it real quick because you're going to need it. And like I said, I'm going to fill this pan up so we got about 2/3 of the way on the cheesecake. And I'm going to bake this for about 45 to 55 minutes, okay? And we're going to check it every once in a while. What are you looking for when it's done? To know it's done. It's not like a traditional cake where you just stick a toothpick in the middle. You're actually going to shimmy the cake, all right? It should be firm all the way to the center, and the center should wiggle a little bit. That's probably the trickiest part of this, okay? So we're going to, at 45 minutes, I'm going to open up the door to the oven. I'm going to shake the cheesecake a little bit, and I'm going to look for it. It should look wet in the center, shiny, a little drier on the outside. All right, so dry, 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 wet. When I grab it and shake it, it should just slightly jiggle in the middle, okay? That way we'll know that we're there. Once you get shiny in the center, just a little bit of jiggle, it's done. And then we can move on to the next step. All right? So when I come back, it'll be about an hour for me. It'll be like a millisecond for you. All right? I'll see you here. All right, guys. I know it's been like a millisecond for you, but oh my gosh, it seems like it's been forever since I've seen your smiling face. So here's what we did. We got our cheesecake together, right? Put it in the water bath, got it in the oven. I set the timer for 50 minutes, not 45, and started checking it. Now, and I should have known this, but this is what the directions said. 50 minutes wasn't going to be nearly enough. Now, it might be if you're using a wider pan and doing a thinner cheesecake, but our cheesecake is really thick. So it actually took about an hour and a half. All right? Now, about an hour and 35 minutes for it to get to where it needed to be. In the process, I learned something new and I remembered something. The remembered something was with the water bath. The water bath does serve two purposes. It controls the temperature, but it also, because the water steams, it's at 350 degrees, it keeps the cake moist and from cracking. Okay, and what helps too. That's our whole end game is to not have this cheesecake, try to not have this cheesecake crack. Now, like I said, personally, if it cracks, I'm fine with it. You know, and it'll just be a crack on the top. You know, but our goal is to not have it crack. So our next step, so not only is it's helping to control the temperature and even consistency because we're cooking it at such a low heat for a cake, for a cheesecake, but it's also keeping it from being moist. The other thing I learned was this. All right, so I've only made a handful of cheesecakes in my life, and I always looked for firm and dry around the outside rings, moist and jiggly at the top. But I learned, because I was doing a little research after I hit the 45-minute mark to see if there was a temperature we could look for in a cheesecake, and there is. And it helps you be more precise with your cheesecake to do your times. That's how I knew I was okay with going longer in time on this. Now I will say this, after the 55-minute mark, I put a piece of aluminum foil just gently over the top so it wouldn't burn the top of the cheesecake being in there so long. And it worked really well. We'll look at it here in a second. But, well, actually, we'll look at it here, and it'll be a second for you, but it'll be another hour for me, because the next step is this, okay? Because it was still, in my opinion, what I thought was a bit jiggly, more jiggly than I liked. Now, it wasn't jiggly on the around the edges, but it wasn't firm enough going in far enough, I thought, for it to be good. But I temped it, and it temped at 157 degrees. So I know it was good enough. So the next thing I needed to do with this is not take it out of the oven. What we're going to do is, I turned off the oven. I turned off the light. It's sitting there in the dark in its water bath, but I've got the door cracked, right? I've got the door to the oven just cracked, which is great because it's cold outside and this is helping to warm the house. But I'm just going to let it sit in there for an hour and cool down naturally. All right, we want it to cool down with the oven for an hour. Then I'll take it out of the oven, and when I take it out of the oven, I'll come back and we'll take a look at it. I'll show you what we need to do next, and then we'll have to put it in the fridge to cool overnight. All right, but first we got to get it down to room temperature, but you don't want to cool super quick. As I said, cheesecake can be kind of labor intensive, but the reward is fantastic. So we're going to let that cool for an hour. When we come back, I'll show you how to get it out of the springform pan, because there's some tricks to it. It should, as it cools, naturally pull away from the sides, but it may not. And we're going to double check that by running an offset spatula around the edge before we pop that. All right, so I'll be back in just 1 millisecond, but that is our next step. Open up the door, turn off the oven, and let it sit there for an hour. All right, see you in a second. Okay, so we let the cheesecake cool completely to room temperature, and I let it sit in the oven for about an hour. Then I brought it out and I let it sit on a rack for about another hour. Cheesecakes are a process, but I mean, in the meantime, we can do other things. But here's our cheesecake right here, and you can see it did get a little dark right here. Yeah, that's all right. I mean, I'm proud of the way it turned out. I should have probably tinned it earlier or put foil on it earlier. Now I just got to figure out what I did with, we'll just use this one. So I'm going to take my offset spatula here and move you down a little so we can see what we got going on. There we are. And I'm just going to take this and we'll run it around the edge. Now, I know you can't see it, but your cheesecake, as it cools, will separate from the side a little bit. You'll see a gap. Well, what we're making sure of by doing this is that it completed the gap. And I got a little cheesecake on there, but that's to be expected. And then all I got to do is pop that clamp and it released. So we'll shimmy that off of there. Yeah, sides are a little beat up, but that's all right. I'll take it. I can tell you what happened. The water that was sitting in the water bath got underneath that rim, and that was completely my doing. That's all right. It won't hurt it, not one bit. But there is our cheesecake. Well, it's a thick crust. So this recipe called for a 9-inch pan. Ooh, it's actually really good. Now, with that being said, I have two different 9-inch pans. Well, I have a 9-inch pan and a 9.5-inch pan. So I think when I go to make this again, although that is a gorgeous looking cheesecake, I will use my 9.5-inch pan. It's wider. And what that'll do is it'll make it shorter, but it'll help it to cook more even. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to put this in my cake holder, or if you don't have a cake holder per se, you can just wrap it with saran wrap, and we're going to put it in the fridge. And I'm going to let it sit in there for a couple hours and completely chill. That way it's completely soft. Or solid. You can see it is solid. And like I said, if I sit here and wiggle it, it does have some wiggle to it. It should be like Jell-O. That's because it's not chilled yet. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the fridge. We'll let it chill for a couple hours. Then when we get back, we'll dollop some cool whipped cream on here. And then we'll put some Cinnamon Toast Crunch on the top and try a piece. All right? See you here in just 1 second. All right, guys. So it's the next day on the cheesecake, next morning. And I let it sit overnight in the fridge after we unsprung it. Now, here's something funny, and I'll show it to you as soon as we move the camera down. Where the cheesecake was so tall, and I now know with a cheesecake that tall to put it in the fridge for a while it's still in the springform pan. Because what had happened was, as soon as I released it, and remember when I jiggled it just a second ago, it actually caused a crack because of the weight of it chopped it down. So cheesecakes are dense. They're heavy. They're supposed to be. So here, I'm going to get you down here. And much like yesterday, on my dinner video, I'm still working now off of 2 tripods because the one broke. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little whipped topping on it and some Cinnamon Toast Crunch in the middle. This is actually my cake holder. So it's a Tupperware container we've had for, 2 generations now. But lid, that way I can keep it in the fridge, keeps the air from getting to it. But our crack occurred, it looks like the Andreas fault, right there. See it? And all it was where this thing, because if you can tell, it's a little shorter, although it looks fantastic. And you know what we're going to do with that cut? Cut it right there when we cut our piece. Not a big deal. Or that crack, I should say. Like I said, we're not going for contests. All right, so I'm going to do some whipped topping dollops around the edges here, and then we'll put some Cinnamon Toast Crunch in the center. Now, I've never actually done dollops with a piping bag, so I practiced this morning. That's how they turned out. They're not perfect. That's okay. We're going to eat it. What does it matter? We're not trying to win contests. I'm not putting this on the cover of a magazine. Now, I have made whipped topping on my channel several times, so I'm not going to show you how to make it, but it's really easy. It's 2 cups of whipping cream, a third a cup of sugar, and a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Which you pick up cream of tartar with the spices or in your baking aisle at your grocery store. For the most part, there's other things you can use for stabilizer because it's simply a stabilizer, is what it is. I mixed that together on high with my hand mixer, and I actually used, let me show you real quick. So with the food processor, the battery operated things also came with a hand mixer. The unit plugs in the back here, the whisks go in the bottom, and it actually worked fairly well, and that way I didn't have to dig out the stand mixer and all that stuff again. I mixed it together, I put it in the piping bag, I brought it all down to where it is at the tip, so there's no air in between. I'm going to grab the end here, okay, steady with this hand, and you just squeeze and go. Like I said, I have never piped cream in my entire life. This is a new one for me, but it'll also help hide those cracks. Now, let's say we were doing a topping on top of this, like strawberries or something like that. It would completely hide that. I will say that using a piping bag is fun. Like I said, I've never used one before. This has always been Chris's area of expertise. She's really good with a piping bag. Now, if you don't have a piping bag to do this with, I don't know if you'd be able to get the spirally looking tips, but you could, or if if you just want to go out and buy the tips aren't expensive. That's what creates that little spiral look. You can use a freezer bag and just cut the corner off of it and put your tip down in there, which is pretty awesome. So I'm doing 2 circles of spirals, like such. I don't know, all in all, I think this cake has turned out fairly successful. It's not even, but you know what? It's okay because we're going to eat it anyhow. And then all we have to do is grab the Cinnamon Toast Crunch out of the cabinet. Yeah, so we buy our Cinnamon Toast, almost all our cereals come in bags. We don't buy the boxes. The bags are just so much more economical. And when we buy them, we put them in Tupperware containers, because once you open them, it's not like we're eating cereal, a lot of cereal. So we put it in containers so they don't go stale. So the last thing you want is for it to go stale on you. Out of the thing there. There is that. I post pictures on Instagram. Well, actually, Chris posts them for me on things we cook for dinner, things we stuff that me and you bake together. And I have yet to have a picture go on there for the most part of something before I cut into it. And I mean, it's not going to happen this time either, because I've only got one camera and we're using it at the moment. And like Chris isn't here, she's taking Abby to school. We're finishing up. Tricks to whip topping with those ingredients. You want to try to use a metal bowl if you have one. If you don't, that's fine too. But stick this bad boy along with your beaters in the freezer for about 15-20 minutes. The longer they're in there, the better. The key to a whip topping is making sure everything is cold. I mean everything. Your bowl, your beaters, your heavy whipping cream. This is the one time you don't want your dairy at room temperature. But let me bring you down here so you can see what we got. And then I'll bring you right back, I promise. All right, and there we are. That, my friends, is our Cinnamon Toast Crunch cheesecake. So now I'm just gonna, we'll cut a piece and give it a taste. Matter of fact, I'll probably just stick it on that plate with the whipped topping. Let me grab that. I don't need all that extra whipped topping. I'm fat enough. I don't need the extra calories, so to speak. We'll go ahead and wipe that off. Save the dish. I mean, I don't know about you, but we don't use, I don't even have a knife. I'll tell you what, I'll be back in just 1 second. Okay, got a knife. Knives are important. Now, with a knife, when you're cutting cakes, pies, especially anything like custard, cream cheese, warm your knife up. You don't want a cold knife. It just helps it cut so much easier and cleaner. And you can warm it up by either just dipping it in a cup of hot water, or we're just sitting here running under the sink for a second, and then we'll just take a towel, dry it off, because that's important. When you dry off your knife, either dry off one side at a time or from the dull side across. Never put it in the palm of your hand like that and run it across. You'll run the risk of cutting through your towel and cutting your hand. I've seen guys do that at work, guys and gals both, a million times. It's never good. All right, so let's get us a slice cut here. I'm not going to do a huge piece because it's not, we haven't even had breakfast yet, and I don't want to ruin breakfast, but at the same time, this could be breakfast. Plus, I'm taking this to work, so the guys at work can try it. They kind of get on me a little bit when me and you bake things together, and then I don't bring anything to work for them to try. All right. There is that. That looks really good. I'm not going to lie. Plus, I'm sure Chris will have a piece, and Sarah may have a piece. But there is our cinnamon toast cheesecake. And I can tell you, just by tasting it on my fingers, it really tastes like Cinnamon Toast Crunch. But it's not, by any means, a heavy Cinnamon Toast Crunch taste. This was a great little recipe. I'm definitely going to keep it. And like on my recipe notes, I put on there, I added to it, I put on there that it has to be above 150 degrees when it's in the oven, no matter how long it takes. And I know when using my deep 9-inch springform pan, which is written down in there, to leave it in the pan, or to leave it unsprung and put it in the fridge for about 30 minutes. Because this was pretty much set after about an hour. I just ran out of time. There just wasn't enough time. So, but anyhow, let's give this a shot and see how it tastes. That's really good. It makes me giggle. It is so creamy. I mean, so creamy. And it tastes just like Cinnamon Toast Crunch. That is, that's a really good cheesecake. Always makes me giggle. It is one of my favorite things to make, hands down. And it doesn't matter the flavor at all. It could be a chocolate cheesecake, raspberry cheesecake. It could be swirled. It could be just topping on top with a standard cake. It just makes me giggle. Give me just 1 second. I'm sorry. All right. So, I'm going to mark this down as a success. I have yet to find. Now, I've been doing cooking and baking now we've been doing this together for about a year. A lot of videos. And I have yet to throw away a recipe. And that was mentioned to me by I think it was Chris, has said that I've never had a bad recipe. And she's right. Part of that, when I start looking for recipes for us, I get things that I think I know, or at least the ingredients sound like they would be something that, I know my family would like. I mean, there's some criteria. Is it something that I think my family would like, or I could add something to that recipe that would make it something my family could like? Remember, like I say all the time, when it comes to cooking, base recipes. Sweet stuff, cakes, cookies, pies. We've had some failures. We've had some cookies that didn't turn out quite right. We've had a pie that didn't turn out right. But they weren't anything that, when revisiting it, I couldn't figure out what went wrong. When we did the pumpkin cookies, it was my oven, plain and simple. Which we bought a new oven. Solve that problem. We'll never have bad cookies again. With the pumpkin fudge that I made, that was just simply the white chocolate chips I was using. They weren't a good white chocolate chip, which made it taste a little weird to me. But now I know, using white chocolate, the bars versus the chips, it tastes fantastic. We'll revisit that again sometime soon. I mean, we're kind of getting out of pumpkin season, so I don't know if it's something we'll revisit anytime real soon, but soon. And then the banana cream pie, that still tasted amazing. It just didn't set, and we figured it out, right? So we've had some, troublesome times, but we've never had a recipe we did that I have come across yet that I didn't like, especially with baking. This one, amazing recipe, and I learned something along the way. It's all about learning. It's never a failure until you quit trying, just like I said in Tuesday's video. but it's also never a failure if you've learned something from it. And I'm always learning. That's the beauty. I'm not a professional baker. I'm not a professional cook. I am a professional manager of a restaurant. And so every time we do something together, it's almost always new, and I'm always learning from it. How to do it a little different, how to make it a little better. And that's the fun part of it, is the learning aspect of it, and I hope you get that from this too. So, that being said, I know this has been a long video, but cheesecakes are a long, not complicated, but at the same time, you got to pay attention recipe. And I want you to get the most out of it and have the step-by-steps. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for hanging with me. But try this recipe. Hands down, try this recipe. I think you will thoroughly enjoy this Cinnamon Toast Crunch cheesecake. It is got a really good flavor to it. It's not horribly heavy on the Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but there's enough there you can taste it. You can still taste the cream cheese, the cheesecake itself. I mean, there's a lot of complexity in that for such an amazingly easy, but a little time consuming, but easy cheesecake. Let me know if you try it. All right? Let me know what you think. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Is Cinnamon Toast Crunch something that you would be interested in making? Or is there a cheesecake that you think is amazing? Let me know. I would like to try it out. I love to try out recipes. So next week, I think we're going to run... I don't know what we're going to do yet, to be honest. I know we'll for sure cook and bake something. I don't know what yet. But work is still kind of, we're still struggling with the whole trying to get employees in the door, get people trained. And so time has really not been on my side lately. So Tuesday, there are things I want to talk about. Some of it having to do with politics, but not a lot, and nothing. I don't try never to choose sides. But there's just some interesting things going on I think we should talk about. Along with some moral things. But that being said, Wednesday we're still going to do dinner. We're still going to bake something for Thursday. But I just don't know what yet because it's not Wednesday or Thursday. But we'll figure it out as we go. So anyhow, I love you. Leave me a comment down below. I love you very much. And I do. I love you guys with all my heart, and I mean that to no end. Tell somebody else you love them and that you love them very much. It's going to make their day so much better, especially if you take them a piece of this cheesecake. All right, so until next week, stay safe, get vaccinated. I mean, I know it's your choice, but get vaccinated. And tell somebody you love them. All right, I'll see you next week. Talk to you later.